Welcome and welcome back, both listeners on the podcast and viewers on YouTube and wherever else you have been able to find the audio and the video. My name is Timothy Sweet. This is episode 10 of the podcast, What Just Happened? Surviving the Family Court. And today we're going to finally and critically look into the case law that is the bedrock of all family court child custody decisions in Rhode Island, that being Pettinato v. Pettinato. Before we make that leap into the deep end, let me introduce the hardworking people I have here helping me behind the camera and behind the microphone. First off, Patricia Raskin of Raskin Resources Productions, who's helped create and produce this podcast. Tony Jones of Tony Jones Omnimedia helping, as well as Guillermo Garcia of Pixels Digital behind the camera. Thank you to all of them. You can find us on YouTube. You can find the podcast on Spreaker, on Stitcher, on iTunes, and just about wherever else you can find a podcast. Thank you again for joining us for the first 9 episodes, and for this one. And if you're just joining us now, your timing is perfect. We're going to take a 2-episode look into the Rhode Island Supreme Court case law, that is Pettinato v. Pettinato, Gregory J. Pettinato v. Suzanne L. Pettinato, because I know it's important to you if you're listening to this and you yourself are going through a family court case, or you have a loved one or a neighbor or a co-worker who is going through a family court case. This is the podcast to listen to. This is the episode to listen to, and you're going to want to listen carefully and frankly even take notes of this podcast if you can, because your knowledge and your comfort level with Pettinato v. Pettinato will make a significant difference on your family court case, and if there are any kids involved in any way. In many ways, the previous 9 episodes of this podcast have led to this one, and we've been building up to it. It really is the Rosetta Stone of family court case law. By far the most important single issue we will discuss in the life of this podcast, or in this podcast series. I've been instructed helpfully by the helpful people behind me here that discussing case law, no matter how important it is and how helpful it is, can at times be dry. So we're not going to let it get boring by any means, but I do think that it's important that we take a layman's journey into this case law, given that it's on the tip of the tongue and hidden in the cabinets of every single Rhode Island family court judge when he or she is making a determination as to whether children will live with husband, with wife, with dad, or with mom, and why. So the case itself, Pettinato, was handed down by the Rhode Island Supreme Court in 1990, in fact, November 30th, 1990. And it's really the single case that every single family law attorney has to have in their briefcase for any morning or afternoon spent in the family court. You really can't try these cases without understanding it, understanding where it came from, what life was like in the family court before it, and what it means for your client. It doesn't sound like fun, but it is extraordinarily important. A note on episode 10 and episode 11, more so than even all the others, I would ask for feedback on, because as we do these podcasts out into the future, I'm going to continue to refer back to Pettinato. There is no discussion of family court in Rhode Island without Pettinato, and so your feedback, while always appreciated, is actually, I would beg for it on these 2 episodes specifically. I don't think anything could be more helpful. So prior to 1990, prior to Pettinato, trial judges in the family court were very much left to their discretion to determine what was in the best interest of the children who came before them. Were they going to live with mom? Were they going to live with dad? Where would they go to school? The neighborhoods involved, the school districts, the money each parent made, so on and so forth. And the judges really had to choose mom or dad, husband or wife, without any kind of clearly defined rubric. without having a set of factors to look into, which they had to consider, which they had to weigh in a certain way. And so the decisions ultimately were less predictable. It became a matter of lawyers sitting with their clients prior to 1990 being asked, well, can I expect my son or my daughter to live with me? The answer would inevitably be, I don't know, and it depends which judge you have, unfortunately. And so the process was less predictable and less transparent, which didn't do anyone any favors, including the attorneys and the parents who lost, or who felt like they lost, who left court without primary custody of their child or their children, never really had a clear picture of what had transpired, which of course only made the attorneys suffer more. The attorneys standing next to them suffer even more, and none the wiser to instruct the next mother or father who came through the door. And then in 1990 we got the Pettinato decision, so that judges who sit and hear a contested issue involving the custody of any child are bound, they must consider the 8 factors set forth in Pettinato and weigh them in a certain way, so that every single person in that courtroom, including you now, if you are listening carefully, and I hope you are, can consider these same 8 factors. It's the same 8 factors we consider. The attorneys are constantly worrying about them, rearranging them, trying to shift the lives, the work schedule, sometimes the apartments, and the recent past of their parties, of their clients, in order to fulfill this case and to try to make the client's life and livelihood fit as best it possibly can within the 8 factors of Pettinato. The best way I can explain it, and that's why the title of this episode is As a Dog Whistle. The judge understands Pettinato, and the judge will speak Pettinato to the attorneys, who also understand it and speak it to one another. Now, if you are unfamiliar with the case law, and you're involved in a child custody dispute in the family court, that conversation is being held and carried entirely over your head, which is unfortunate for you because these are your kids we're talking about. So if you listen to this podcast, and if you have the time, even look up the case law itself, the dog whistle, when it's discussed, will not go over your head. You'll hear it, you'll understand it, and then understanding this case will help you understand the family court in general. And here's how this will help you. If you are in a position where you're in a family court case involving the custody of children, and the opposing party or the opposing counsel has an attorney, you'll be doing yourself a huge favor by listening to this podcast and by reading this case law, because there is no other single thing you can do. There's nothing else you can do more important in preparing for your case, your day in family court, than understanding this case law. There's nothing else. I won't say, of course, that reading and understanding Pettinato will exactly put you on an equal playing field with opposing counsel, but it'll get you damn close, at least in the family court. In the family court, this is, and can truly be said to be, this is the only thing you need to know. This case, these factors, how it applies to your life, to the life of the other parent, and how it is we define that nebulous idea of what's in the child's best interest. So that's the context in a very, very brief bit of history. Again, I could go on about Pettinato at length, and certainly more than anybody would want to listen to. We could talk about this all day if I had the studio time, but understanding the importance of this case in the family court will, I hope, instill upon you the importance of next week's podcast, where we're going to go through all 8 factors subsumed in Pettinato and the case law, so that you know just what the judges know and the attorneys know, how it is to determine whether the child will live with you or with the other parent, and why. So that hopefully you are seeing this on YouTube or listening to this on iTunes or Spreaker, and you are not yet embroiled in a case, but you know these 8 factors, and you can already start to make slight but significant adjustments to your life and your lifestyle so that you can comport with this case law as best as humanly possible, so that the judge will look upon you most favorably when you come before them. So once again, feedback never more important than it is with episode 10 and 11. You can reach me at timothymsweet@gmail.com. You can find me in thus this podcast just about anywhere. You can find a social media feed, and you can find my website, timothymsweetlaw.com. I will see you next week, where we will discuss anecdotes and stories, as well as the 8 factors themselves that comprise Pettinato v. Pettinato. Thank you so much for your feedback in advance, and I look to hear from you throughout the week. Talk to you next week.